Hello there. My name is Jaiye Bynoe. You're on the Jayman Show on WBCA 102.9 FM, Boston's local community radio station. My guest today is Linda Champion. Hi, Linda. Good to see you on the show today.
Hi, thank you for having me. It's good to see you as well. I haven't seen you since I was stumping the campaign trail out in 2018, or if you're interviewing some celebrity, so I'm
Yeah,
happy to be included.
yeah, absolutely. I've missed you so much. Yeah. So I'm so glad to have fun to have you on my show. Yeah. So okay. So what have you been up to since I last saw you?
So I've been up to the same thing. I mean, I'm still, out in the community doing work with Urban Edge through their programs trying to build equity. I joined a couple boards, Justice for Housing, and we have some legislation pending to end housing discrimination for people who were formerly incarcerated. I have done some work on the political side, chairing a committee for a company called Emerge Massachusetts, which trains women to run for office, and helped Julia Mejia this past year with a pilot program called the Political Lab. So, just staying busy, trying to stay active in the community, trying to, give information and advice where I can and where it's welcome.
Well, that's wonderful to hear, because we definitely need more leaders like yourself, in the community, so that's wonderful to have you out there, helping us, because we need all the help we can get, especially now, so yeah. And so what made you want to do political work in the community? What and what drew you to that?
Well, so for me, what drew me to just helping people in general is just because, I had so many people help me. When I came to Boston, I was displaced and, I had sort of left home. I was in the streets. I had nowhere to go. And there were a lot of people in the community that opened their doors to me and helped navigate me. I was 17 years old. I was alone. I had nobody. I'm not from Boston originally. But I've spent my entire adult life here in Boston. And so you have to remember those things. Like you have to really remember the people in your life who help navigate you on the right path, right? Because I could have met so many people who navigated me down the wrong path. But I was able to meet people who navigated me in a positive way, and that was very helpful to me. So what I wanted to do and what I've always wanted to do was give back. And I think it takes one life to change a life. And I've had so many people change my life.
Well, that's wonderful here, and I'm so sorry that you're homeless. I never knew that about you. I mean, um,
Yeah, so that's one of the reasons why I spend a lot of time working with Urban Edge, and it's one of the reasons why I spend a lot of time in spaces like Justice for Housing to end housing discrimination, because sometimes discrimination is just because of being youthful, right? People don't want to rent to you because they think you're too young and you can't handle the responsibility, or they'll say you don't have any credit. And so, but at the end of the day, housing is an essential right, and it's so necessary for every human being, right? And so we can't judge based on age. We can't judge based on past circumstances. We have to make sure that people are adequately housed and they have access to quality, affordable housing. And then what happens in our community, people keep using that term affordable housing loosely, right? And affordable housing for me means what people can afford so that they can have a quality of life, not that they're going to go work two jobs just to pay rent, right? So we have to move away from using the word just as an adjective, but not really understanding what that word truly means. Affordable housing, if you're paying $2,000 a month or $1,500 a month and you only make $50,000 a year, that means you're shackled in poverty until you can get a better job, right? Or you get a third job, or you start, doing Uber cart or something like that, right? So we want to make it so that people can have one job and have the ability to live their life and do other things with their life, whether it's go to school or raise their children or participate in the community as a coach or do some of the things you're doing, working in local radio and TV. But you really can't do that if you're working 2 and 3 jobs just to make ends meet. And oftentimes, if all of your salary is going to the rent, there's nothing left to buy food. And that's the disconnect that I see with a lot of people in running for office, that they're young, they don't really understand what it means when they're talking about affordable housing and the lion's share of someone's paycheck going to rent and also trying to raise their children.
Yes, I definitely agree with you, because I admit it is, people are moving to Boston and it's really coming up, expensive to live here, because it's a lot expensive to live here than it's live down in Florida, down south, so I definitely agree, and because we have the best schools, the best schools, and yeah, so I definitely agree with you, we should try and maybe lower some, make some more changes so people can afford to live here and go to school here, right? I definitely agree.
Right. Well, we need to stop building housing for upper middle class or building housing for dual income earners, because not everyone has a partner, right, that they can share expenses with. So we need to make sure that we're also balancing it out and designing housing for, the person who's working in the hotel industry as a housekeeper, for someone who's working at McDonald's, right? Someone who is working and earning a decent living and going to work every day and working hard. And then they go to try to find a clean, affordable house or a place that they feel comfortable walking to and from because they don't have a car. And then they're met with a barrier, and that barrier is the access. And then where do they see all these beautiful luxury high rises going up? In places and at price points we can't afford. I mean, even Ink Block, and where Ink Block used to be a dump, right? I mean, even Ink Block is like, for a small little studio, it ends up being like, how much? Like $4,000 a month.
Wow.
And so we see it, we see the developers coming into the community and building it, but they're not building it for us.
Yeah, you're right, because from what I see that most people are sort of building stuff for the rich, and not really helping the middle class or the poor. So I do agree, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So what was like growing up for you? I mean, was it hard for you to grow up? Because I know you said you were homeless. I mean, how were you able to to get from that stage on to where you are now? How about
Yeah, so for me it was growing up was so my father is a Black American from Texas, and he met my mom. He was a soldier, so he met my mom during the Vietnam War. So my mother came to this country when she was about 22 years old. And then I was born in the United States. My older sister was born in Korea, but soon after I was born, my father was deployed again, and that would be the last time I ever lived with him and saw him. So I was really young, and my mom was left with 3 Black children in the South. And at that time, back in the early 70s, the South was nowhere to be as an Asian woman who didn't speak English with 3 Black kids. I mean, you could not pick a more hostile environment for someone who was not an English speaking native. And so my mom really, really struggled, and she tried to make it work, but it was difficult, not speaking the language, not having her family in the United States, not having anyone to lean on. And then she was walking around with these 3 kids, and, people didn't know what we were. And then, what are they? Why do they look like that? Why is their hair like that? How do you comb their hair? All these little things that you don't even think about in day-to-day life. But back in the early 70s, when racism was at a high in this country, it was difficult. And so when early on in my life, I went into like a gypsy foster care system. And I call it a gypsy system because we were passed to people that knew my mom, but it wasn't like a formal process set up by the state. So we were just, we were dropped off at one house for 3 or 4 years, and then we would be uprooted and dropped off at another house for 3 or 4 years. And that process was difficult, right? So I remember, and I have like one of my foster brothers who I call my cousin. I to this day, I laugh with him because I remember growing up on the Louisiana Bayou and having no clothes, and I would have to borrow his clothes, and he would wear them one day to school, and I would borrow them and wear them the next day. And then there were 2 other kids in the house, and I would borrow their clothes. And, growing up was tough because what people think is a hard life. And, and I'll hear them and they'll say, oh, life is so hard, or, oh, we're poor, or we're this. But then I would look and I'd be like, but you have your mother and father, you have your family with you. And, here we were little girls with no one. And so that, we never had a birthday. We never had Christmas presents under a tree. We never had, a special meal made for us. Like we didn't grow up with all the things that people take for granted when they have a parent, even if it's one parent in the house. Those things you take for granted with having a parent there and in the house. And so, it wasn't for me until much later in my life that I reconnected with my mom, and I was already graduated from college and I was at a different stage of my life. And I think that I truly began to understand the struggle that my mom had in this country as an immigrant without any support and without any help when I went to Korea and I got stuck in Beijing, China, and I didn't speak the language. Unlike the Korean language, some things I can understand and I can speak, but the Mandarin Cantonese language, I couldn't speak any of the dialects. I couldn't read them. I couldn't sound them out. And I was stuck there for 2 days. And it was one of the scariest experiences of my life. And I didn't experience that until I was in my 40s. And it was at that moment that I truly, truly had a deep appreciation for my mom and what she did and what she went through. And so she always felt that by leaving us with families who spoke English and who had access to education, that she was helping us, right? But as a kid, when you lose your parents, you don't see that as a help. You see that as a hurt. But now just understanding, her being so young and the predicament that she was in, it gives me like a new appreciation, and it gives me a different feeling on how we need to embrace immigrants who come to the United States and who come into our city. Like we need to be like always gracious, always kind, always just trying to help as they navigate and they try to learn the customs, the cultures, and the language.
I definitely agree with you. We need to be more giving, more respectful of them come over here because they've had to be here as much as we do. So I definitely agree with you. We need to treat people with respect, and yeah, just be kind of one another. I definitely agree. Yeah. So what inspires you? What gives you inspiration and hope?
What inspires me is, when I was in Boston and I was young and I had no one,
Mm-hmm.
and I had all these things that I thought I could do. Like I, wanted to go to college, and but I worked 2 jobs. I worked day and night. I went to night school, but I always felt like life was like really hard. It was always a struggle. And I used to always feel like, wow, I just wish I had somebody who would help me. I wish if I just had a little help, if I had someone help me do this, then I could get into a better college, or I could, afford my tuition. But I never had that. Like I never had anyone around me or in my life that could help me in a meaningful way. And so if you can't have it, then be it, right? So I didn't have it, but I understood the difference it would have made in my life. So what I try to do is help people around me, or help organizations around me in the way that I wish I had received help, so that we can get people in the community to sort of realize their full potential. Not all of us are going to be blessed with a sponsor through life, a mentor or someone who has an established track record and they can open doors. Most of us are going to be like me, where we have to just get out there, work hard, and it's just like every day picking up that cross and carrying it, And so, but if we have the ability to lighten the load and help people, I wasn't always in that position, but now I am in that position. So if I do have the ability, whether it's to make an introduction, whether it's to open a door, whether it's to, go to an event, do whatever, then I want to make sure that I'm doing that. And I'm trying to instill that in my nieces. And you met my niece at her Care and Civil event. And so just getting my nieces to understand the importance of bringing resources into the community so that people can meet other people and network and share information.
Yes, I definitely agree because meeting people and socializing network, and going to college like I did, stuff a way to get ahead, So I definitely agree, Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So would you ever consider running for president of the United States someday? That ever came up,
Oh, well, listen, I would run for president of the United States because that is the highest honor in the land. Whether or not, I would be able to be the next Barack Obama or Kamala Harris. I mean, obviously, you aspire to be that, right? As a politician, those are the people we look up to. Just the way they carry themselves, the way they handle adversity, the way they've overcome different challenges. But at the end of the day, being the president of the United States, or even being the mayor of the city of Boston, right, is not, it has more to do with the day-to-day tasks that you have to do to ensure the safety and welfare of people and of our country. And, you can only imagine how you would feel if you were the sitting president and all of a sudden you got those horrific images of the border and, Haitian immigrants trying to come into the country for safety and shelter. And, and you have to pivot your day to answer and figure out the best way to handle a crisis. And so most of our leaders are either going to be faced with some crisis, whether it's COVID and how they're going to respond to that challenge, whether it's a shortage of employees and how you're going to get children to school, or something as simple as how you're going to, close up that pothole so nobody loses a tire, or no motorcycle goes through it and has an accident. It's the day-to-day responsibility of helping other people, and then just having like a joy of doing that and not seeing it as challenges, but as seeing it as, yes, everyone's going to have a difference of opinion. No two people are going to think the same. You can't please everyone, but I think at all times you have to do what's right, what's based on your moral compass and your values, and then and do your best. Make decisions that are, I always say to people, you make decisions that are right for you and for others, but you have to live and die by those decisions, because if you make the wrong decision, it has consequences.
Yeah, that's very true. I definitely agree. So how did COVID-19 affect you?
So COVID affected me because, one, I mean, obviously my mother is a senior. My stepfather's a senior. What was great for us, though, is both my parents, when my mother came to this country, she used to work for a company called Levi's. You remember Levi's? Do people still wear Levi's?
Yeah.
And she worked for a company called Jordache. Do you remember Jordache? I don't know if kids remember Jordache, but she would work in the morning for Levi's, and then she would work a second job. And the other factory she worked for was Jordache. And she would make and sew jeans. And so when COVID hit and they were saying that there was a shortage of supplies, one of the things we were able to do is we made thousands and thousands of masks. We made masks for firefighters. We made masks for police officers. We made masks for seniors. We made masks for any nursing organization that contacted us through Facebook or the internet. And we, I picked them up, I drove them, I dropped them off, I made them for people in my office. And it was our way to try to step in and help. And we were so busy that the year flew by. It literally flew by. And the requests, we couldn't even keep up with the demand. People were calling, nurses were calling from other states, asking that we help them with a particular mask, and they wanted particular designs. And because my parents can sew very well, they were able to customize things to the specification that they needed it. And so we were really busy. So COVID affected us in that way. And then just the general fear, like, you don't want to get anybody sick. You don't want to get sick. And then just trying to hunker down and keep everything clean, and making sure we were, checking on people that we loved. But we also, lost a lot of people. And it was really sad. It was sad not being able to go to a funeral. It was sad going to the gravesite and just having to be in your car and, having to keep a distance and just being petrified of hugging anyone or touching anyone, right? And so it had a profound effect. But what it also did is show you how fragile life is, and how, we just really can't take people for granted. And, when people ask you to do something, if you have the ability, just do it. Don't put off for tomorrow what you could do today, because it's just so not promised to any of us. And that is what COVID really brought to the forefront.
Yeah, I definitely agree, because we lost so many people during COVID, so, and yeah, so, and plus, and trying to, and also trying to live life better and not take it for granted because it can be gone for you, right? Because I don't, because I definitely agree. I lost my mother. I felt self-diagnosed. I know what you mean,
Mhm.
Yeah. What do you think we can do to change the world in your opinion to make the world better for next generation?
I mean, to make the world better for the next generation, we have to not hoard resources and information. People aren't looking for handouts. Do you know anybody? I don't know anyone who's just looking for the handout. Everybody wants access to information and opportunity. What happens is, when we're looking for access to information and opportunity and we don't get it, and we keep trying to hit a brick wall, we get tired. And some people will give up. Some people will try to find a different way of doing it, but why? Why? None of us are doing anything new that wasn't already done under the sun. So why not just say, hey, I don't know if my way works for you, but this is what I did. I don't know if you need this information, but this is the information I have, right? And so even with during COVID, like we all should have been on sharing information about how to get the PPE money or how to apply for forgiveness. Or, not many people knew that to get the funding, you had to have an account somewhere, right? Or the difference between being an entrepreneur or a 1099 employee and how to do that. We need to start sharing information about what it means for things like new legislation that's coming up for gig workers. When people say, "Oh, you're going to be self-employed, you're going to be an independent contractor," but what is the worker giving up in exchange for that title? And how is that going to impact their life? So if they get hurt or in a car accident, they die, who's going to get survivor benefits, right? Do they give that up? If somebody does something to them and they're wrongfully terminated, what recourse do they have? We're not talking in our community, we're not talking about the things that are important, right? We're not talking about emerging markets like cannabis. How are we going to make money in cannabis, especially after so many of our children have either been shot, killed, or jailed behind a drug or, an herb that is now legal? And so if now it's legal, there's so much money being made, but how much of that money is trickling back into our community? And for those men and women who were incarcerated behind it, what has been done for them to remedy what was done to them as it relates to cannabis, right? There's so many things that we have to unpack and fix and do. So much work to be done. But to change the world, we have to make sure that it's fair and just and equitable for everyone. And you don't get that if people don't know where the resources are.
I definitely agree, because you're right, because since this illegal stuff is free, like drugs, that money should be going to help people like that homeless. I agree, that's not fair that they make money off of weed and stuff like that. Should be going to people. I agree, fair, and we definitely need to make some change for us all so we can have all live in peace and harmony. I definitely agree, yeah, yeah. Where do you see yourself maybe 5 years from now?
Oh, 5 years from now. I mean, I hope that in 5 years, I'm in a different position in my life. My daughter will be graduating from college and I won't have to worry about her so much. Hopefully she'll be independent on her own. And I can start to do some of the things that I'd really love to do, which is more reform work, more policy type work, maybe running for office, maybe running for a Senate seat or congressional seat. But I definitely see myself moving forward with more public service type work and continuing to do work in the community. Because for me, it's work that I do already, whether I do it paid or unpaid, doesn't matter to me. So that shows me that it's work that I love because I'm willing to do it unpaid. And I'm willing to, and I do the work and I don't really need a whole lot of fanfare around the work that I do. And so I just think that because of that, it also shows me that that's sort of probably where I need to be. in a space where I can look at what the issues are, understand my life experience, being a teenager, being homeless, not growing up with my parents, coming out of poverty, being born to an immigrant mother, and then just understanding how all these things shaped who I am, and then looking at the transformation in my life and how that transformation came through the kindness and service of others to me who didn't have to, right? They had no obligation to helping me. And then in the power of education and the power that had in my life, to get me to the point where I was able to finish college and buy a house and be a homeowner and have a family and raise my daughter and now send her to college. So there's power in education, but nobody can do it alone, especially for family, people like me with my background, where you have your first generation college student, you don't have a family structure who understands all the nuances and requirements. And so it kind of gets put on the back burner, secondary, upper, going on to school and continuing education. But I think that I want to make it so that school is easier, education is easy to access, that it's not so costly. But to do that, it's like, these are systems, right? These are systemic systems that have existed for many, 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 many centuries. It's about the have and the have-nots. And how do we get to the point where there's some fundamental things like housing, like education, that people should have a right to, and then they can access it. They don't have to do it, right? You don't have to buy a house, but if you choose to buy a house, there should be no obstacle or barrier to that process.
Oh yeah, I definitely agree. Because I hope to be able to buy a house someday, maybe in California, Florida. Where it's nice and warm. I'm not.
Yeah.
Because I love Boston, but not in the winter time. Snow, cold.
No, none of us like it in the winter time. It's too cold.
Yeah. Have you thought about maybe moving to California, Florida, to get out of the cold and snow? You mean?
Oh no, because I'm scared of the earthquakes and I'm scared of the hurricanes. So and then if you come off the water, right, if you're in Central Florida, it seems so, it's like where I grew up in the South. It's just flat land and low buildings, but I like Boston, and what I love the most about the Northeast is the diversity of people and cultures, and the fact that you can eat. Think about it. You can go out and try food from anywhere in the world almost here. And when I grew up in a town called Longview, Texas, when I was younger, there was only one place that I could even buy sticky rice. And there were no Korean restaurants. So even if I, wanted to eat Korean food, I couldn't, because it just didn't exist. And the nearest restaurant that would have it would be 3, 4, 5 hours away.
I see. Wow. Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. But you're right. I mean, Boston does have some good seafood here. I love seafood, so I definitely agree. Because it's fun, just not during the winter time. Because you can't do nothing in the snow. So
Yeah.
Yeah. I see. Wow. So my next question is how did the George Floyd incident affect you, and what do you think we can do to change racism? And make, I guess, make police, kind of about what they do to African Americans, like me.
Well, so you got to spend a lot of time doing training on implicit bias. And so, how does a person see someone? And do they see the person, or do they see that that it's a Black person, and that immediately makes them fearful? And if they're fearful, and they're going to be defensive, and if they're defensive and they have a gun, then they're going to shoot, right? So what is it about a situation or a person that causes the other person to feel like the person that they're talking to is an aggressor? So I don't consider myself like very aggressive, but I consider myself to be a passionate speaker, especially about something that I feel very strongly about, or I'm trying to make my point. And I remember being at work, and my supervisor, who was a white woman, was having this conversation with me about a case that I was working on. And as I was explaining to her my position, she took a step back and she said, well, we're gonna talk later when you calm down, right? And I was like, calm down. I'm not angry, you know? So what it shows you is that white people have a certain perception when we are talking, when we're trying to present information, when we're having conversations. Like, I'm having a conversation with you and you think I'm being aggressive, right? And you're trying to shut down the conversation because you feel threatened. Or I'll give you another example. You know, I don't know if the rumor was true, but there was this rumor that another white woman who worked in the office, there was a young Black man, and he went to her office to ask her a question. And he didn't even enter the office. He stood in the doorway to ask the question. And she filed a complaint saying she felt threatened by him. But so he can't ask you a question. And he was, in my opinion, a very nice guy. I never felt threatened when I saw him. I've had lunch with him at the office. I've seen him, you know, in the hallways. I never felt threatened. So why then do you feel threatened? So what we have to do is look at the implicit bias that people are bringing. These are learned behaviors. Someone told them that Black men were dangerous. Someone told them that this is the appropriate way to express yourself. And then we come in and we may not fit their social norms, what they think is normal. And now all of a sudden we're the aggressor, we're the danger, we're a threat. And so that's what we have to stop. And the way you get around that, right, is spend some time with people who don't look like you. Spend some time in other areas and other communities so you can start to see, you know, I mean, it's the whole argument with rap music, right? They were like, oh, it's terrible music. It's gonna cause people to be disruptive. It's you know, it's horrible. And now white kids in the suburbs loved the music, and now it's so normal and mainstream that, you know, they've forgotten the original arguments. So how do we normalize our complexion? I don't know, but I know that it's conversations, and no one's going to ever admit to being a racist, but we know that they're racist. And then, you know, and I always say this, when people start telling me how many Black friends they have, or how many, you know, oh, I know a Black person. Well, then you don't know enough, because I have so many friends from so many different walks of life, from so many backgrounds. I can't name just one, right? And so, and now you live in a diverse area. Why do you choose? Because it's a choice. Why do you choose to only associate with people who look just like you? Why are you not learning? You don't have to like everyone. You don't have to be best friends. But you should know the differences between a change in my voice or tone or demeanor that is serious or joking, right? You should know, these cops, you know, should know how to de-escalate a situation. And at the end of the day, if you give respect, you get respect, right? So just treat people with respect. And you and I both know a lot of police officers who are very respectful. People can be yelling and screaming. They don't get agitated. They don't lose their composure, and they stay calm. But we also have seen, you know, I remember getting pulled over on Morrissey Boulevard, and I was just trying to get out of the cop's way. His sirens were going. I didn't know if I should go left or right. And so I chose to go right, and he pulled me over, and he was screaming and screaming. His face was beet red, and he was spitting all through my window and on my face. And I was like, why is he so angry? And so that venom that exists in a person by the mere presence of us as Black people, that is racism. Those are things that are in you. And until you can sort of admit that, we can't fix it. You got to be open to change. You got to say, you know what, I do have an implicit bias. I see a Black person in a position of authority, or I see a Black person on the street, or they give me information, and I don't really think their information's accurate, even if it is. Why? Because you've been taught that we're not as smart, we're not as capable, we're not as good, we're not as talented. And so you would rather get the exact same information from a person who is white, who looks like you, right? And so we have to be willing to first admit it, then 2, begin the conversations, and then 3, start the process of breaking down in literally eliminating systemic racism and systems of race separation and implicit bias that exists.
I definitely agree with you. I feel the same way, and I'm sorry that cop pulled you over, that wasn't right, I mean, if you don't mind me asking, do you remember why he pulled you over?
So he said he pulled me over because he said I was going straight, which I wasn't. I was trying to go to the right, but I pulled up into the side because I thought he needed to go ahead. And he said it was a turn violation. So it wasn't even anything serious. But police officers have to understand, as lights are flashing and you're approaching cars, not everyone has the same temperament, right? So people really, if you think about it, people really don't know anymore what to do when the sirens are coming. They don't, and you've seen this driving. They either keep driving or they don't stop or they don't pull to the shoulder. And so, the issue for me is that they don't even give you the benefit of the doubt, right? I get that it's a dangerous job. My father was a military police officer. He was a sharpshooter. He, it was in combat and at war. And I understand the dangers. I have friends and family members that are police officers. So I do understand the dangers, but, everybody wants to come home safe at the end of the night. But also, you still have to treat people in the community who you're paid to protect and serve with dignity and respect.
Yes, I definitely agree. We should be treated with respect and dignity. So okay, so that's my next question is, how do you feel about the death penalty, the death penalty? Because I think that sometimes if people get executed for something that they didn't do that, like for example Troy Davis. I think he was innocent and they still took his life. I think I was just saying wrong.
So the death penalty question is a loaded question, right? So morally, I grew up in a Southern Methodist church, and my beliefs as in religion, is that I don't have the right to take someone's life. I don't. Now, am I obligated to follow the law? Yes, and thankfully in Massachusetts, our state law does not have the death penalty, right? However, having been a prosecutor, having worked on cases, having seen horrific cases, and you think of the child, the little boy in Cambridge who was abducted and sexually assaulted, duct taped, put in a barrel, and thrown in the Boston Harbor. Who am I to tell that mother and father in the depths of their anguish and pain and sorrow, that they shouldn't feel that someone is deserving of death after they did that to their child? Who am I, right? Because everyone, what I find, and now practicing law going on well over 21 years, everyone always has a position on something until it happens to them. And so it's not how you feel right now, right? So think about it. You're in the grocery store and this kid's acting up, and you always hear people say, oh, if that was my kid, they wouldn't be acting like that. No, your kid's gonna act like that too. They all act like that, right? But people always have that, what they would do. And it's just simply not true until you're in the situation, until you're confronted with that. Now, I say that. However, I think that the reason families want justice, and they want justice to be fair, is because in situations like that, nobody wants to make a mistake. And for me, the worst thing you could ever do in life is falsely accuse someone of a crime they did not commit. The worst thing you could ever do is take 1 second of freedom away from an innocent person. And so those are the things that we have to guard against. And those are the things we have to always be diligent about, right? And so that's why anytime I see people doing things in the community and there's allegations of this or allegations of that, and all of a sudden the community starts to hold people in the light as if it's true, when there is no jury of their peers who convicted them. And so now someone makes an allegation against you and you're that for life. That's not fair. Because even though you didn't incarcerate them, the court of public opinion did convict them. And the shame and the humiliation and everything that flows from that stays with that person. It's attached to them, right? Even though they're innocent. So for me, we have to be very, very careful how we do things to people, the death penalty being one of them. Because if you, as a survivor, say, what would you like to see in terms of a penalty or punishment, and the death penalty is on the table and you ask for it, and they ask the court to grant it and it's granted, and then you realize that it was a mistake, we got a problem, right? And that type of guilt and remorse you also have to live through. So, for me personally, I would just not ever want to be in a position of having to choose life or death for someone. And I would never want to be in that position because I would never want to get it wrong.
And me neither. I definitely agree, because it's a serious.
Because it's not reversible.
I know. So once it's granted, it's not reversible at all.
Well, you can appeal it, but once they execute someone, I can't bring them back to life.
And that's true. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So, and what if you're wrong?
Mm-hmm.
So, and I understand, and it's expensive to execute someone, but, we really have to figure out, instead of talking about the death penalty, how do we get the community healthy, right? How do we make it so that people have the resources that they need, the treatments that they need, so that we're not supporting a system of incarceration and prosecution? How do we get it so that we're putting that money in other places, into entrepreneurship, into education, into travel, into personal development? How do we make it so that we put law enforcement, put them out of business, right? Make it so that they're like a small town, and the most exciting thing that they're doing is getting a cat out of a tree. But, how do we get to that point? And, those are big questions, but, they've created this big industry that relies so heavily on so many things. And mostly it relies on people being broken.
Yeah, that's true. This is you're right. This is some serious things that we have to think about. I definitely agree. Because you're right. It's like this whole economy is bad since COVID. Then we had Trump as president. He made things worse, in my opinion. Well, the same. So we have to try elect better people like yourself. And if you run for president, I'll definitely support you 100%. Because you're such.
Well, I appreciate it. Every vote counts. Every vote counts.
Because I'm serious. I hope that you won in 2024. Because I'll support you. Because I think you and your capacity to make some wonderful changes. If you can, so I definitely support you. So.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I appreciate it.
That's what I appreciate. Yeah. So I guess the next question is, what do you like to do for fun and travel when you're not working? What is that?
I love to travel, and I love to travel because it's not that even when I go travel, I don't like to do anything except eat and try new foods. And but I just like to travel because I think it helps us have a deeper appreciation and respect for the United States. I feel like there's a lot of privileges we have that we take for granted. And I remember going to China and wanting to get on the internet, and they wanted my passport. That scared me, because you have no access to the outside world, and you want to get on the internet and they take your passport to do it, track and monitor what you're looking at, and block and restrict certain sites. That was unnerving a little bit. So the other thing is, you see in some countries poverty in a different way. So, I always thought I was poor, and I grew up down, I spent my younger years on the Louisiana Bayou, but I was on the Louisiana Bayou. I was right on the creek, right by the levee. I could take string and some bologna, and I would go down and hunt for crawfish. I had wild berries in the field, and you just got to fight the cows for them, but you can get them. I had fig trees all around growing, and you could just go and pull the figs off and eat, sit and eat. We had pecans all in the field. We'd bag up the pecans. We'd get some condensed milk and make some pecan candy. So even though we were poor, right, we had access to food, nutrition. And, I go to some of these countries, and what access do they have to even clean running water? And so I just have such an appreciation for traveling, because it just makes me realize how much we have in this country. And, it gives you that boost, that recharge, when you get back, like, okay, it's not so bad, have it pretty good. I remember going to Mexico and being in a hotel, and the only hotel I could stay at was government run. And so along the entire perimeter of the hotel were soldiers holding machine guns. And so these are the conditions that people live in their daily life in these countries. And, we get to go in and leave, but those families never get to leave unless they try to cross the border or they get some assistance from the government, right? So it just gives me an appreciation for what we really have.
Yeah, I agree, because a lot of people tend to take things for granted, right? And it makes you realize, you should take that for granted, because you be grateful for what you have, you're right, because it could be gone. So I definitely agree, yeah. Yeah, so what's next for you? So what are you working on right now? What's next for you, for the end of the year? Any plans for holidays,
No plans for the holidays. So my daughter is at the University of Maryland, so I'm gonna try to help, travel back and forth down there to see her and make sure she's getting settled into school. And then just because of COVID and this Delta variant, it's like you really don't know which way things are going to go. But I've heard some, I'm looking forward to a lot of things that are coming up in the community. I heard the Van Gogh exhibit is coming to the Strand Theater, and I hope people come out for that. I think that's going to be exciting. This mayor election coming up over the next 5 weeks, and the city council races, I want to participate in that and support candidates and get out there and shake hands and hold signs for people, and just kind of encourage people to run for office and to be, have fun with it, right? And meet, I met so many people when I ran for office. I met you, like I would never have been at BNN and able to meet amazing, talented young folks in the community had it not been for me running for office. So I think that people should just embrace it and just have fun with it.
Absolutely. I'm going to be at Mayor Janie's event tomorrow, Cobby Square. It's a 90s event from 6 to 9, I think.
No, I didn't know about the event. But see, again, access to information and resources, right? Making sure people are spreading the word and people know where to be, and that it's, that, because remember, Facebook, everybody relies on Facebook, but it's an algorithm. People don't necessarily get the information, and sometimes I'll see news feeds, but it'll be days later after things have already happened.
I see. Okay. Yeah, because I agree. Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, those are all, LinkedIn, those are all good, sites to go on to find out information that's happening in Boston, plus all over the world. I definitely agree,
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
And what are you doing for the holidays?
Well, let's see. Well, I'm trying to go to Florida, Walt Disney World,
Okay.
Big for Christmas, New Year's. I'm gonna try, because
Yeah.
I went last year. It was wonderful. I went 2 years ago. It was wonderful. It was wonderful.
Yeah. I love Disney. I love Universal Studios too. Universal Studios, I think, is one of my favorite places.
Yeah, me too. I was actually there the summertime. It was wonderful, hot, but it was great. So
Nice.
Absolutely, yeah. Okay, so do you want to? Okay, do you want to ask me some more questions?
No, I hope that you get out and meet some of the new executive directors that are in town doing some amazing work, like Leslie Creedle, who's over there at the Center for Justice for Housing. And she's got some amazing things happening. She's got a pilot program going on right now with the city of Boston to have help formerly incarcerated people secure housing in the city. And then, you know, there's just so much stuff going on with the ballots and the bills, and, you know, what the work the Urban League is doing to share information. And I was honored to accept an appointment to the Urban League's board of directors this past year. And so, you know, just making sure that the community knows, like, all those ballot questions that we have to vote on, making sure that you know, you have some guests on here that can really talk more in depth about them, so we can really start to educate the community on, you know, what we need to protect. And the thing that we need to protect the most are jobs for the community, access to housing for the community, and making sure that our children have access to education and quality education and systems.
I definitely agree. Now I'll try and reach out to them, see if they can come on my show. You know, definitely will. You know, because I think you're right. You know, we need to make the voices heard, right? Because that's
right. Right. So we need to, so I find that, you know, in communities of color, sometimes we're reactive to situations. Things happen to us and then we have to try to fix it. But I think we need to be proactive. We need to start paying attention to the direction we want to go in and what we want for our community, what we want to see. And we need to be that change that we want to see. We don't need anybody to do it for us. We can do it ourselves.
Yeah, I definitely agree, you know. But it's also good to help, you know, because, because we can't do it all by ourselves, right? We need help too, right? You know, I try, but sometimes I need help myself, you know. So, you know, yeah. No, so yeah, but this is so great to talk to you guys. I really missed you, you know. And so, how can we find out? So, how can we find you on social media?
So on social media, I'm on Twitter at ATTY Champ, Attorney Champ. And then I'm on Facebook as Linda Champion, and Instagram as I am Linda Champion.
Oh, that's wonderful. Yes, we can reach out to you anytime, you know, because this is so wonderful to have you on my show and talk, you know. So, you know, and
yeah. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Appreciate it too, and let's stay in touch, you know. You know, always work anytime you want, you know. So always talk on my show, you know. So, you know.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, take care. Have a good night, and so God, appreciate it again.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Bye-bye.